Here's the seal for that tapered roller that's in here that we also covered in an earlier video. And so this guy's all ready to rock. We're going to put the brake on it, put the other bearing on there, and then we're going to start putting some power to this guy. So these three studs, if you recall from I know the video is out there on this brake. So here's the brake assembly minus the air cylinder. There we go. We're going to slip this guy in here. Now, I talked in earlier, I spoke a lot in earlier videos, the text videos, before I do these live presentation ones, about designing things that either cannot be built or cannot be maintained. And this is a good example. To get this brake, it's probably not going to wear out in my lifetime, but eventually these pads will wear out. They may need to have some kind of a maintenance done to this piece here. So we don't want to disassemble the entire machine and wreck the bearing preload and do all that. So because these uprights are torqued on it, so there's a lot of work to get in here to get this brake off. So this brake can actually go in there and curve in, and that's what that clearance is for. So this can curve in there so that it can be removed for maintenance without pulling the machine apart. It's either, but if you look under here, I'll just rock it back and forth. You'll see the top part, or the stationary pad. We don't want that touching this upright. As long as it's off the upright, that's good, because then it has room to flex. And when this brake, when the cylinder grab pushes on this lever, it's going to actually pull those two pieces together. This is going to flex a little bit and allow that to happen. So in order to hold this in here, we have self-locking nuts. It's a self-locking nut on the underside and on the top. This rotor is going to be locked onto the shaft, onto the spindle in a particular location. And once it's locked down, we use these screws here to adjust that caliper back and forth until it doesn't touch the rotor anymore, because unlike an automotive brake where the pads actually ride on the rotor the whole time, the pressure is relieved, but the pad is still in contact with the rotor. And part of the thinking there is so that debris and various things can't get in between the pad and the rotor, keeps the rotor clean, and so forth. But in this case, then they scrape and they make noise, but you don't hear that inside the car when the pads are dragging on the rotors. But here, in this case, this thing can spin up as fast as 4,000 RPM if you're using collets, and we don't want this pad dragging on this, because it's going to create a lot of heat. So we retract the pads, but of course it's not out in the rain, it's not driving through mud or gravel or anything, so there's nothing that's going to get on this rotor. It's completely enclosed, so we don't worry about stuff getting in between the rotor and the pads. We do worry about the pad dragging on the rotor, making a lot of heat. So that heat's going to transfer into the spindle and into the bearings, and that's what we don't want. So we're going to retract those pads completely back off of the rotor. And in the earlier video, you saw the little springs. That's their purpose in life, is to retract that pad back so that there's a little gap. So in order for there to be a little gap on either side of the rotor, we have to be able to adjust this caliper up and down in this particular orientation, in order to center the rotor. Right. The camera is not going to allow you to see into here, but with your eye, you can look in here and you can actually see the pads. And then you adjust this in or out until there's a tiny gap between the pad and the rotor on each side. See, this is a tapered roller. This is not going to be it's not going to stay in the right spot until we get the other bearing on there. So let's do that. All right, so this goes on now this way. And unfortunately, we have to drag that seal across those threads, but the threads are blunted on top so that they don't tear the seal up. And once these align in the back, we've got 4 very large screws, fasteners to put in there. So we'll get this guy going on here. These will just be snugged up for now, and then the upright is checked to make sure that it's perpendicular both this way and also this way. And then once it is, all these 4 bolts on each upright get torqued. And I'm torquing these guys to 70 foot-pounds. They could actually take a lot more than that, but everything's pretty true. So, and it's aluminum, so it's they're not going to pull the threads out, but they do have a tendency to become a permanent part of the structure. You can never ever get it apart again if you torque them up too much. All those seals are starting to put some drag on this thing too. We have a tapered roller to go on the back, right here. This guy's going to go on like so. Now this one, probably in automotive school, they teach you to pack these bearings in the palm of your hand or with a bearing greasing tool and so forth. But for industrial bearings like this, that run on grease, they don't need to be completely packed with grease, because as they warm up, the grease will liquefy a little bit, and they also, if you put too much grease in there, when the bearing gets warm, it just pushes the grease out through the seals. So they need enough grease in there to coat everything, but it does not need to be packed to where there's absolutely no airspace in there at all. And if you choose to do that, you could always do it after the fact through the grease fittings, which is right here for the front one. The rear bearing, since it slips, and I want to inspect it once in a while, and it also has the preload. I don't have a grease fitting on that because this rear seal is bolted on. The rear seal comes off easily. The pulley comes off easily, and then we can inspect that bearing and repack it at that time. All right, here's a little trick where Steve cheated. I have to have there's a rear seal. This is the last of the 4 seals. It's going to go on the back here. That's the O-ring that we put in earlier, seals against this to keep the grease from leaking out past that mount. Once this is pushed up in there, we need a surface, a smooth, shiny surface for this seal to run on. So since this threaded collar is actually going to retain the bearing preload, and the only place that we have to put a seal is around the outside of this. And of course, this has a split in it, so even leaving part on here and then trying to polish that when that split comes around kind of destroys the purpose. So this here is a outer race of a light duty bearing that's offshore, shall we say, and I wouldn't use the bearing for anything else because this is new, but they're pretty trashy bearings. But it's great to buy this $10 bearing or $6 bearing, whatever it was, and just take it apart and use this outer race as a ready-made surface for the seal to ride against. So all I have is a little land on here, and this goes up on it, snaps in there, and snaps in there with some condenser. Okay, that adjustment worked, and now I have this actually rides against this inner race to establish the preload, and it also serves as the surface for this. So I'm just going to have it on there for a minute while we use it to pull that bearing in nice and straight.